Hi everybody and welcome back to Lost Genre Reddit Stories. This post is from the subreddit Am I the A-hole and it's by user Throwaray yet another one. Am I the a-hole for booping my mother-in-law's nose when she kept touching my baby bump? I am 31 weeks pregnant with our first. We announced our pregnancy at 13 weeks and everyone was super excited since they will be the first grandchild on either side. I started showing at about 4.5 months and initially tried to be patient with my mom, mother-in-law, grandparents, aunts, random old lady at the store when they wanted to touch my belly. I wasn't crazy about people constantly rubbing my belly like I was some Buddha statue, but let it go since everyone was excited. After a few weeks, I got touched out and politely asked people to stop or would nicely say no when they asked, which most people respected. Mother-in-law tends to be overbearing and pushy, very much has main character syndrome, gets pouty and grumpy when she doesn't get her way. She was the only one that continued to constantly touch my belly even when I tried to say no. She'd always say she's just so excited she can't help herself. The bigger I got, the more it happened. A couple weeks ago, we were visiting my husband's relative for an event, and as soon as we walked in, mother-in-law made a beeline over to us. That day, I was just feeling icky, big, tired, uncomfortable, you know what I mean. I put one hand out to stop her and tried to cover my belly with my other hand. She brushed my hand aside and started rubbing my belly. So that's when I got super annoyed and gently booped her on the nose. I even said boop. She just looked really confused and we ended up walking away to go talk to other relatives. As we were leaving that night, she put her hands on my belly again, and as soon as she did, I booped her again. We saw her again some days later with one of her friends. Her friend asked if she could touch my belly, and I nicely told her my stomach was all touched out and she was fine. No drama. While that was happening, mother-in-law snuck up on me and started rubbing my belly again. And I booped her on the nose again. She looked really annoyed and said how irritating that was and asked why I kept doing it. I told her that if she was going to keep rubbing my belly after I asked her not to, I was going to boop her on the nose. She got mad and said I was being childish and dramatic. That night, she called my husband crying and said I was being mean and embarrassed her in front of her friend. My husband got annoyed with me and said she was just showing how excited she was and that she's from an older generation, so it wasn't nice of me to do that to her. He said that instead I should have talked to her again and explained why I didn't want people rubbing my belly anymore. Am I the a-hole for booping my mother-in-law's nose when she kept touching my baby bump? Of course you're not the a-hole OP. Personal space is a thing. Also, if you don't want anybody touching you, they should respect your wishes. It doesn't matter if she's from another generation or if she's super excited about being a grandmother or whatever. That is irrelevant. So no, I would say continue to boop away. Now there is another issue here, and it's that your husband's not standing up for you. Instead of letting himself being manipulated by his mom calling him crying on the phone because you were mean to her and getting annoyed at you, he should have just told his mom, "Mom, that wouldn't have happened if you had respected my wife's wishes to not be touched." So seriously, OP, I think you need to sit down with your husband and have that conversation, that he should be running interference, not getting annoyed at you. And what do you guys think? Let me know in the comment section, and now let's check out the community comments. I Am Irene says, quote, "She brushed my hand aside and started rubbing my belly," end quote. What? Oh, the sheer audacity. I friggin' love how you handled it though, LMAO. Quote, "She got mad and said I was being childish and dramatic," end quote. She has zero problem breaching your very clearly communicated boundaries and then she gets all huffy when you respond in kind? Lol. You are definitely not the a-hole here. You have a right to bodily autonomy whether you're pregnant or not. She thought she was exempt from honoring your boundaries. She effed around and found out. I think it's hilarious. Perhaps your husband needs a boop or two as well, since he doesn't seem to understand the situation enough to support you in this. Patty S13 says, "She's from an older generation and is just a touchy-feely person. Nope, your husband needs to be on your side, period. I am a hugger. I am a very touchy-feely person. I am also from an older generation. My daughter's fiance does not like being hugged. Therefore, I don't hug him." When I was pregnant, it never bothered me when people touched my belly, so I can't relate. That doesn't mean I don't understand. When my daughter was pregnant, if she didn't want to be touched, I didn't touch her. People need to stop using an age or a generational bias, or that's just how they are, to excuse bad behavior. Bad behavior is exactly that. Bad. I think you booping her on the nose is a hilarious, adorable way to make your point. And if your husband can't be on your side, he needs to go back to living with his mother. And Miss Fabulina says, are you a human being or just an incubator to mother-in-law? Same question for your husband. One person here, maybe two, are being childish and dramatic, and it ain't you, OP. We all should have agency over our own bodies. Running up to you, not to say hi or ask how you are doing, but to greet the baby bump is BS. I would just start saying loudly, please don't touch me, every time she comes close, not the a-hole. The community agrees that OP is not the a-hole and that she needs to have a conversation with her husband about her mother-in-law. So now, let's move on to the update to see how this story ends. I posted a couple of weeks ago about how my mother-in-law would not listen to me when I asked her not to keep touching my baby bump. When I posted it, I kind of meant it as an amusing little vent about my mother-in-law. But when I started reading all the comments, thank you all so much for your comments and support, it made me stop and think about how often this kind of thing happens. About how often my husband defers to his mom and how he never has my back when it comes to her. I've been trying to psych myself up for all the boundary stopping once our baby comes in about 7 weeks, but as I was reading through all the comments, I started to realize that this isn't normal, or at least it shouldn't be. I probably spent way more time reading about everyone else's mother-in-laws, and it was really validating to see I wasn't the only one that struggles with their mother-in-law. I have a good relationship with my mom and dad, but, well, they are typical, I think, parents. They offer unsolicited advice, come to our apartment and move things around to help, etc. We disagree about stuff and argue and fight sometimes, but here's the thing. When I tell them to stop whatever they are doing, or when I or we don't take their advice, they don't get mad. They don't say, I told you so, when we ignore them and then things don't work out like we expected. When we fight, they don't hold grudges or cause any drama. And honestly, I can't think of any fight or argument that has lasted longer than the conversation where we had the fight. By the time we finish talking, either I or they will have apologized and we move on. No drama. And most importantly, they respect my relationship with my husband and respect that we are adults who can make our own choices. On the other hand, I'm always walking on eggshells around my mother-in-law. She's easily offended and really thinks she is the main character in everybody's life. When she asks us to do something, it really means she's telling us what she wants done. My husband never says no, and when I try to establish boundaries, he gets completely frazzled that I don't want to do whatever mother-in-law says. So, after reading everything, all the comments and the personal messages, I actually got really super pissed off. So, I sat my husband down and told him, I can't do this anymore, and I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm not going to continue to prioritize his family over mine. I'm not going to continue letting mother-in-law ruin special events or continue to cancel plans when she asks us to do stuff that conflicts. My husband started to get angry and honestly, he looked like he was about to cry just at the thought of saying no to her. I used the baby bump rubbing as an example and asked why he thought it was okay for her to ignore my request to stop. He tried to say it's normal, she's excited, she's old, she's not that old. And finally the classic, that's just the way she is. I pointed out that everyone else stopped when I asked them to, and even mother-in-law's friend that was with her asked first if she could rub my tummy, and when I said no, she wasn't upset or anything. I pointed out that my parents, my grandparents, my aunts and uncles all respected my boundary. Then, like some of you suggested, I asked how he'd feel if my dad rubbed my husband's belly or something like that. I think I broke his brain because he understood what I was saying but was still struggling with the idea of going against his mom. We had several conversations. It should have only taken one, but I had to drag him kicking and screaming to the conclusion, and I told him, starting now, I'm establishing boundaries and that going forward, his family is not more important than mine. Then I said that his mom's wants are not more important than my boundaries. So, to start with, Christmas. My family has always opened family presents on Christmas Eve at my grandma's house with my aunts, uncles, cousins, etc. And as we got older, it wasn't really about the presents. It was more of a family get-together, and we'd all open a couple presents and then open the rest when we got home. Then, Christmas morning, we'd open presents from Santa with our immediate families before going back to grandma's for a late lunch with the family. But the lunch is more optional because everyone recognizes that people have other family and obligations. So, the Christmas Eve thing is really the important one. My husband's family opens everything Christmas morning and then spends all day at his parents' house. But mother-in-law still wants everyone to come over Christmas Eve too. In past years, my husband and I would try to spend Christmas Eve with my family and Christmas Day with his. But without fail, mother-in-law would ask us to stop by to pick up gifts. Why? We'd see them the next day or some other lame excuse. And then she'd give us a hard time when I said we needed to go to my grandma's. I told my husband that this year, I'm not going to mother-in-law's for Christmas Eve. I'm not letting her cut into my family time. And then starting next year, when our baby is here, we are going to spend Christmas morning by ourselves. I told him we can still do Christmas Eve with my family and Christmas dinner with his family. We've also been struggling or arguing a lot about my birth plan. His mom wants to be in the room when our baby is born and then wants to come stay at our apartment for a while to help us out. I told my husband none of that is happening. As of right now, the only person I want in the room is my husband. If I change my mind and want someone else, it'll be my mom. When he asked why I didn't want his mom, I asked him if he'd want my dad watching him trying to push a watermelon out of his ass. He didn't find that as funny as I did, but I think I made the point. When the baby goes home, I don't want anyone visiting for the first week, but we can reevaluate depending on how I feel. And as of now, I don't want anyone staying. We don't live too far from our respective families. But again, if I change my mind, it's going to be my mom first, and then we can see about his mom staying, but that would depend on whether she's following our lead. It was a much longer and more difficult conversation than it should have been. My husband really thinks his mom is the main character and should get priority. Christmas Eve was a mixed bag. We did end up going to mother-in-law's around mid-afternoon, but I said we had to leave by 5 so we could get to my grandma's and spend some time with my family before dinner. Mother-in-law tried to get us to eat with them and then got upset when I said no. At 5, I said it was time to go and she started guilting my husband and trying to tell me we could stay a little bit longer, etc. I said no, we'd see them tomorrow, so tonight was time for my family. It was much more difficult to leave than it should have been, but I stuck to my guns and we ended up leaving by 5:15. Christmas Day, mother-in-law was still upset and didn't talk to me much, but apparently she really gave my husband a hard time and it sounds like he threw me under the bus. After Christmas, things were pretty tense between me and my husband. For New Year's, he went to his family and I went to mine. His family was having a whole party and was going to stay up to ring in the new year. Being pregnant, I just wanted something quiet and relaxing, but since mother-in-law asked, he had to go. When I said I wasn't even going to make an appearance, my husband got all stressed out about what mother-in-law would say. She did end up texting both me and my husband on a group text saying how disappointed and angry she was that I would disrespect her like that. I left her on red and haven't talked to her since. The next conversation I have with her will be about the birthing plan, so that should be fun. I may chicken out and invite both our sets of parents to go to lunch somewhere and tell everyone the plan all at once. Even if my husband won't have my back, I know my mom and dad will. I'm not sure what's going to happen with my husband and I. I'll be honest, I'm not very happy with him right now. But I also know that changing a lifetime of behavior doesn't happen overnight. But we have 7 weeks to get on the same page. Well, OP, first of all, good for you for setting strong boundaries, enforcing them, and having yourself be respected. It is sad that your husband's not on the same page with you, but maybe when your baby arrives, they'll come with a spine for your husband. In the meantime, here's wishing you the best in the future, OP. Thanks so much for sharing and take care. And now, let's finish this video with a mood booster post. This post is from the subreddit Malicious Compliance, and it's by user WemBD94. Got reprimanded for not leaving my uniforms at work, so now I didn't have any uniforms at home when it mattered. A couple of years ago I was in the Navy and assigned duties on board a ship. At the start of the story I was an extremely junior service member, lowest rank in my shop. Typically on board the ship the usual uniform was coveralls in our department, and we arrived and left from the ship when in home port in civilian clothes. Now, we were moving up the river, about 4 hours underway, about an hour driving distance, for a week to unload weapon stores for a training exercise underway coming up later that month. Typically, when leaving the area on the port of record, which we would for the training exercise, we're also required to have suitable transit uniforms on board in case we pull into port elsewhere. For this week-long weapons load, I had no plans to leave the ship, and we weren't leaving our port of record's geographical area and would be returning to our home berth again before the upcoming trip, so I didn't prep my uniforms to bring on board, seeing no use for them. At the last minute, our medical department scheduled medical appointments on our behalf at a small satellite clinic at the weapons station with no input of our own, and informed me I'd have a dental appointment while there. I immediately went to my supervisor with the issue because I had no suitable uniforms for off-ship use on board, and we were required to attend medical appointments in uniform. I get written up for not having my uniforms. Now, there is no specific policies on which types or how many uniforms are required to be on board, but there are specific policies on having sea bag inspections and what is required to be present for them. So, my write-up was for not having an inspection-ready sea bag available. Copy that, makes sense. When we get home that weekend, I move all my military uniforms aboard, bringing a full inspection-ready sea bag to the ship as required and leaving no uniforms at home. Everything's peachy. Fast forward a few years and I have commanding officer's approval to miss an upcoming late-minute rescheduled underway due to prior scheduled leave in order to re-enlist. While I'm halfway across the country re-enlisting, my department fails an important inspection for our deployment workups. The inspectors work with the ship's command to reschedule, and they adjust the underway schedule last minute again. Now they're getting underway for a re-inspect the night before my leave ends, and the re-inspection starts the day I return from leave. The inspectors will be ferried to the ship the morning of by water taxi. They ask me to curtail my leave a day early, buy new tickets, and show up to help with this re-inspect. I informed them that I would prefer not to dole out thousands of dollars of my own money for last-minute changes to travel arrangements because of their failure, but understand if ordered I can financially do so. Since my leave was approved by the commanding officer to miss an underway, I'd like verbiage from the commanding officer that my leave has been rescinded, recalling me, and if I receive such, it'll make me question my dedication to re-enlisting in a Navy that doesn't care about my financial well-being. Meaning, I'll leave the 6 months earlier than they expected, when I get out of the Navy instead of re-enlist, and won't return with signed re-enlistment papers. They balked, of course, and had me report the day my leave was originally planned to end. They decided I'd catch a ride with the water taxi and all the senior officer inspectors for the hour trip to meet the ship. Sounded interesting. The stinger? I asked them what I should wear for the water taxi ride as all my uniforms were on the ship. They freaked out and asked why all my uniforms were on the ship, naturally. I explained I was ordered to do so by my supervisor and received a counseling chit for not having left all my uniforms on the ship previously. My options? Some recently cleaned coveralls. I'd take them home for laundry, ensuring I kept 2 pairs on the ship as required for sea bag rules. From before my leave, or my civilian clothes. Why? Because that's what I was told to do the last time a shipboard uniform use issue came up. So yeah, there I was, a junior E5 in civilian clothes on board a chartered water taxi with a bunch of 04, 05, 06s in their uniforms at 5 in the morning on the way to redo a previously failed inspection. Well, OP, hopefully your lack of uniform wearing on that water taxi didn't cause the ship the inspection. Thanks for sharing, OP. And that's it for today's video. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch it. Now, if you've gotten to this point in the video, I assume that you like these stories that I'm reading out, so here are a couple more that you might enjoy. And if you don't have any time to watch another story right now, save it for later, and also, don't forget to hit that subscribe button.